You have been to that appointment. You sat on the paper-covered examination table, the blood pressure cuff tightened around your arm, the numbers appeared on the screen and your doctor looked at them, looked at you and said the same thing doctors have been saying to seniors for decades. Your blood pressure is too high, you need to reduce your salt intake, you need to exercise more, here is a prescription and you went home, you put down the salt shaker, you tried to walk more, you took the medication. And your blood pressure stayed high, or it came down slightly and then crept back up. Or it responded to the medication, but the medication came with side effects that made you feel worse in different ways than the high blood pressure did. And at your next appointment, your doctor looked at the numbers again, and either increased your dosage or added a second medication, and the conversation about why this was actually happening never really took place. That conversation is what this video is about. Because what most seniors are never told, not because their doctors are dishonest, but because the conventional medical model does not leave room for it, is that salt is not the primary driver of high blood pressure in the majority of seniors over 60. It is a factor, it is relevant, but it is not the root. And treating a symptom while ignoring the root is why millions of seniors are managing their blood pressure with medication year after year without ever actually resolving the underlying problem that caused it in the first place. I want you to sit with that for a moment, because if what I just said is true, and the research supporting it is substantial and has been accumulating for years, then the approach most seniors are currently taking to manage their blood pressure is fundamentally incomplete. Not wrong entirely, incomplete, and that incompleteness is the difference between managing a condition for the rest of your life and actually understanding what your body is trying to tell you. So what is the real cause of high blood pressure after 60? The answer is not a single thing. It is never a single thing when it comes to cardiovascular health in older adults. But there is one mechanism that sits at the center of almost every case of age-related hypertension that the conventional salt and exercise conversation consistently fails to address. And that mechanism is arterial stiffness, not plaque buildup, though that is related, not cholesterol, though that plays a role. Arterial stiffness, the progressive loss of elasticity in the walls of your blood vessels, is the primary physiological reason that blood pressure rises and becomes increasingly difficult to control as you move through your 60s and beyond. And the factors that drive arterial stiffness are almost entirely separate from how much salt you put on your food. Here is how your arteries are supposed to work. When your heart beats and pushes a surge of blood through your circulatory system, healthy elastic arteries expand slightly to accommodate that surge and then contract again to help propel the blood forward. They act like flexible tubes, absorbing the force of each heartbeat and smoothing out the pressure wave as it travels through your body. This elasticity is what keeps your blood pressure within a healthy range, even as your heart works continuously throughout the day. Now here is what happens as those arteries stiffen. When a stiff artery receives that same surge of blood from a heartbeat, it cannot expand to accommodate it. The pressure has nowhere to go, so it registers as higher pressure against the arterial wall. Your heart has to work harder to push blood through a system that is no longer cooperating with it the way it once did. And the harder your heart works, the more wear it accumulates, the more the surrounding arterial tissue responds to that strain with inflammation, and the stiffer the arteries become in response to that inflammation. It is a cycle. And once it begins, salt restriction alone cannot break it. So what drives arterial stiffness beyond the natural agging process? This is where the conversation your doctor never had with you becomes critically important. Because the drivers of accelerated arterial stiffness are specific, they are largely dietary and lifestyle based, and they are almost entirely within your control to address once you know what they are. The first driver is chronic insulin resistance. And I want to explain this carefully because most seniors associate insulin only with diabetes and assume that if they have not been diagnosed with diabetes, insulin resistance is not their problem. That assumption is dangerously incorrect. Insulin resistance exists on a spectrum. You do not wake up one morning with diabetes. You spend years, sometimes decades, in a state of progressively worsening insulin sensitivity, where your cells become less and less responsive to insulin signals. Your pancreas compensates by producing more and more insulin, and that excess circulating insulin does something that almost no one outside of specialized research circles talks about openly. It directly stiffens arterial walls. The mechanism is well documented. Excess insulin promotes the growth of smooth muscle cells in arterial walls, making those walls thicker and less flexible. It increases sodium retention in the kidneys, which is ironic given that salt restriction is the primary advice most hypertensive seniors receive, and it triggers an inflammatory response in the endothelium, which is the delicate inner lining of your blood vessels that is responsible for regulating vascular tone and flexibility, and what causes insulin resistance to develop and worsen. Precisely the dietary patterns that have become normalized in the average senior household. Refined carbohydrates consumed multiple times daily, Ultra-processed foods that spike blood sugar rapidly and repeatedly. Sedentary periods after meals when blood sugar has nowhere to go and insulin has to work overtime to manage it. The same breakfast, lunch and dinner patterns that feel completely harmless because they have been part of life for so long that questioning them feels unnecessary. The second driver of arterial stiffness is chronic magnesium deficiency. And this is perhaps the most underappreciated cardiovascular risk factor in senior health today. Magnesium is the mineral that your arterial walls depend on to maintain their flexibility. It regulates the contraction and relaxation of smooth muscle tissue throughout your vascular system. When magnesium levels are adequate, arterial walls can respond dynamically to changes in blood flow. When magnesium is deficient, those same walls lose their ability to relax fully between heartbeats, creating a baseline tension in your vascular system that registers as elevated blood pressure on every reading your doctor takes. Here is the problem. Studies consistently show that the majority of adults over 60 are chronically deficient in magnesium, not borderline deficient, significantly deficient, and the reason is twofold. First, the modern food supply has seen dramatic reductions in magnesium content over the past 50 years due to soil depletion, meaning that even seniors who eat relatively well are consuming far less magnesium than the same foods would have provided a generation ago. Second, several of the most commonly prescribed medications for seniors, including proton pump inhibitors for acid reflux, diuretics for fluid retention, and certain blood pressure medications themselves, actively deplete magnesium from the body as a side effect. So you are taking a blood pressure medication that is depleting the very mineral your arteries need to maintain their flexibility. And nobody mentioned that to you at the pharmacy. Now we arrive at the third driver of arterial stiffness. And this one is the most overlooked of all three, not because the science is weak, but because it sits at the intersection of two things that the conventional medical conversation about blood pressure almost never connects: chronic dehydration and vascular inflammation. And before you tell yourself that you drink enough water, I want you to stay with me for the next few minutes. Because what most seniors consider adequate hydration and what their arteries actually require to maintain flexibility are two very different things. Here is what happens to your arteries when your body is consistently underhydrated. Blood becomes more viscous, thicker, harder to move through a circulatory system that is already working against the resistance of stiffening arterial walls. Your heart has to generate significantly more force to push thicker blood through narrower pathways. That increased force registers as higher blood pressure, and your kidneys, sensing the reduced fluid volume, activate hormonal systems, specifically the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system, that cause your blood vessels to constrict further in an attempt to maintain pressure. Constricted blood vessels mean higher blood pressure, and higher blood pressure sustained over time means more arterial wall damage, more inflammation, and more stiffness. It compounds. Everything in cardiovascular health compounds. That is the central truth that the take your pill and reduce your salt approach fails to account for. But the dehydration problem in seniors is not as simple as just drinking more glasses of water per day, because aging fundamentally changes how your body signals thirst. A younger body sends a clear, unmistakable thirst signal when fluid levels drop. An older body sends a much quieter signal, sometimes no signal at all, meaning that seniors can be significantly dehydrated without feeling thirsty in any recognizable way. You can be walking around, going about your day, feeling completely normal while your blood viscosity is elevated, your arterial walls are under unnecessary strain, and your kidneys are quietly activating pressure-raising hormonal responses to compensate for a fluid deficit you are completely unaware of. This is why researchers studying hypertension in older adults consistently find dehydration as a compounding factor in cases where blood pressure refuses to respond adequately to medication. The medication is addressing the symptom. The dehydration is perpetuating the underlying condition, and the two conversations never happen in the same appointment. So now you have the three drivers that your doctor's standard blood pressure conversation almost certainly never addressed with you. Chronic insulin resistance silently stiffening your arterial walls through excess circulating insulin and vascular inflammation. Chronic magnesium deficiency robbing your arteries of the mineral they depend on to relax fully between heartbeats. And chronic underhydration thickening your blood, activating pressure-raising hormonal systems, and compounding the arterial strain that both of the first two drivers are already creating. Three mechanisms, all operating simultaneously in most seniors with persistently elevated blood pressure, all largely invisible to a medical model that measures the outcome, the high reading on the blood pressure cuff, without fully investigating the upstream causes producing that outcome visit after visit, year after year. Now I want to be absolutely clear about something before we go further. I'm not telling you to stop taking your blood pressure medication. I'm not suggesting that medication is unnecessary or that pharmaceutical intervention has no place in managing hypertension. For many seniors, Medication is an essential part of keeping their cardiovascular system safe while the underlying drivers are being addressed. What I am telling you is that medication alone, without addressing insulin resistance, magnesium deficiency, and chronic dehydration, is managing a condition that could be meaningfully improved at its root. And you deserve to know that distinction. So what can you actually do starting today? Let us be specific, because general advice is what got most seniors into this situation in the first place, and specific, actionable information is the only thing that produces real change. On the insulin resistance front, the single most impactful dietary change you can make is to stop eating refined carbohydrates first thing in the morning. Your insulin sensitivity is at its most vulnerable in the morning hours. A breakfast of cereal, toast, orange juice, or sweetened yogurt, the standard senior breakfast in millions of households, triggers a sharp insulin spike at the exact moment your body is least equipped to handle it efficiently. Replacing that breakfast with protein and healthy fat, eggs, avocado, full-fat Greek yogurt with no added sugar, a small handful of nuts, immediately begins reducing the chronic insulin elevation that is stiffening your arterial walls. One meal, one change, a measurable impact on the mechanism driving your blood pressure higher every single day. On the magnesium front, the most bioavailable dietary sources are dark leafy greens, particularly spinach and Swiss chard, pumpkin seeds, dark chocolate above 70% cacao, black beans, and wild-caught salmon. Adding 2 or 3 of these to your daily diet consistently will begin restoring magnesium levels that have likely been depleted for years. If dietary sources feel insufficient, or if you are taking any of the medications known to deplete magnesium, a magnesium glycinate supplement, not magnesium oxide, which is poorly absorbed, taken before bed, is one of the most well-supported and gentle interventions available for vascular health in older adults. Many seniors who add magnesium glycinate to their routine report noticeably improved sleep quality as an additional benefit, because magnesium plays a central role in nervous system relaxation as well as vascular relaxation. On the hydration front, the approach that works best for seniors whose thirst signals have become unreliable is scheduled hydration rather than thirst-driven hydration. Do not wait to feel thirsty. Set a simple rhythm. A full glass of water upon waking before anything else enters your body. A glass before each meal. A glass in the mid-afternoon. A smaller amount in the early evening to avoid disrupting sleep. That structure, roughly 6 to 8 glasses spread intentionally across the day, gives your body the consistent fluid intake it needs to maintain healthy blood viscosity and prevent the hormonal pressure-raising responses that dehydration triggers. Adding a small pinch of quality sea salt and a squeeze of lemon to your morning water improves cellular absorption significantly, making that first glass of the day considerably more effective than plain water alone. These are not complicated interventions. They do not require expensive supplements, specialized equipment, or a complete overhaul of your daily life. They require awareness, the specific, targeted awareness that comes from understanding what is actually happening inside your arteries and why the standard advice has not been enough to fully address it. Your blood pressure is not simply a number that needs to be pushed down with medication and salt restriction. It is a signal, a communication from a cardiovascular system that is carrying more strain than it should be and looking for specific support that the conventional conversation consistently fails to provide. When you address insulin resistance, when you restore magnesium levels, when you give your body the hydration it needs to keep your blood moving freely, you are not just treating a symptom. You are changing the conditions inside your arteries that produced that symptom in the first place. That is a fundamentally different approach. And it is an approach that the majority of seniors living with high blood pressure have never been given the opportunity to try, not because it does not work, but because nobody sat down and explained it to them clearly enough to act on it. You have that explanation now, and I want to hear what you think. Drop a comment below and tell me, did your doctor ever talk to you about insulin resistance, magnesium, or hydration in connection with your blood pressure? Yes or no? Because your answer tells me something important about how widespread this gap in the conventional conversation actually is. And it helps me understand exactly what information this community needs most. Every single comment gets read, every single one. If this video gave you something your last doctor's appointment did not, share it with someone you care about, a spouse, a sibling, a friend who has been managing high blood pressure for years without understanding why it keeps coming back. That share could genuinely change something for them. And if you want to keep receiving clear, specific, research-backed health information made exclusively for adults over 60, information that goes beyond the standard advice and gets to what is actually happening inside your body, then subscribe to Senior Pulse and turn on your notifications. Because the next video covers something that affects nearly every senior in this country, and almost nobody is talking about it openly. You do not want to miss it.